Hi there and welcome to this episode on Astro again. Today we're going to be talking about Astro as a whole, and is it actually bad as of 5.0? Right. Currently, Astro is considered by the community to be the worst healer in terms of its healing potency, its DPS potency, and as well as its card buffs not being that great to compensate for it. Now I will also go over where I think it might be better to buff Astro and where it might be better to just leave it be. Astro is sort of like a second love to me, and it has been since 3.0. Like during 3.x, I had to be a scholar briefly, and then when I could, I went back to Astro because basically 3.0 Astro was just worse than current iteration of Astro. Like, and I will say that foot forward first. This current iteration of Astro is nowhere near unplayable. It is fully fine to do all content at the moment. We have yet to have Savage, but judging by the developers' comments on it being roughly the difficulty of Alexander Creator, Astro should be fine in that content as well. If we had another Gordius situation, that would be entirely different, where Astro may just never be used for that sort of content. What are the biggest problems with Astro right now? Its current card buffs do not offset its lower healing potency as well as its lower DPS potency, especially when it's compared to the other two healers, which are Scholar and White Mage. This is the fundamental problem with Astro right now. You are essentially gimping your party a little bit by if you can play either of the other two healers better or as good, because if you play them all equally as good, that means you're going to be bringing out higher personal DPS, as well as if you go Scholar, higher just as good party buffs, and White Mage phenomenally great personal DPS, which is above and away. Just White Mage is just rocking it right now. Like, go White Mage. You deserved it after 4 years, but it really shouldn't have come at the cost of Astro, in my opinion. Like, Astro should not be in its current state. White Mage should still provide what it provides, but Astro should really not be in its current state. Now, the thing I would buff the most for Astro would be its card buffs and a few of its abilities. Right. Currently, its divination buff is way too weak for given its long cooldown. So either its cooldown needs to be reduced, potentially even to every minute and a half, or it could be used the moment you have 3 seals, which means you might be able to get like one divination off every minute and a half, but with sleep draw get off a second divination in quick succession. This will boost Astro's raid DPS without touching its healing potency or its damage potency, and it'd probably be the best way to do it. I feel like Astro needs to be going all in on its card buffs. But this is fundamentally where it should get its biggest support. Right. Other such things that I feel could be added is potentially giving a small MP regen on light speed. Like it currently reduces cost, but I think a small regen, like maybe equal to a size, might help with MP issues that Astro currently has, especially when it has to spam. I also feel like maybe horoscope, the moment you proc it into horoscope Helios, I feel like it should be, if the timer runs out, to go off automatically, not just that it wears off. It's a small quality of life, and it will probably just help out a little bit without affecting anything else. It just literally allows the heal to go off if you proc it. Now, Celestial Opposition, which is the, you know, the big AoE, depending on your set, gives an AoE regen if you're in Diurnal, and if you're in Nocturnal gives a small AoE shield. I believe the cooldown should be 30 seconds, or you buff the healing potency of the regen, or buff the amount of shield that it can generate, given its current iteration. It is far too weak for its very long cooldown. So either buff it and lower the cooldown quite significantly, or buff the potencies and keep it on the long cooldown. Either one. Now, this is one of my biggest gripes with Astro right now. Collective unconsciousness is vastly inferior to Sacred Soil. Now, Scholar may not want to do this with their resources, depending on what's going on in the fight, what is better, and so forth. But at the moment, Sacred Soil can potentially have a 50% uptime, can be placed wherever it needs to be. Scholar is not rooted and can freely cast as well as other things while Sacred Soil is up. It's bigger, it has a much wider radius, so it can fit generally around most bosses, so hitting the main tank as well as party members on the rear. Whereas Collective Unconsciousness, not always going to be the case. Sacred Soil also, at level 78, heals more than Collective Unconsciousness, and Sacred Soil also has a 30-second cooldown. Now, the buff only lasts for 15 seconds, while Collective Unconsciousness can potentially last for up to 33 seconds. I highly suggest never doing that with Astro. At most, you're going to want the bubble up for a couple of seconds, maybe more if there's downtime, and only if there's downtime would you have it up for longer than a couple of seconds, because you would just want the brief amount of the regen to go on, and for about 5 seconds the mitigation. Yeah. Sorry, this is a bit ranty, but I really do feel that Collective Unconsciousness is so underwhelming, especially when you compare it to Sacred Soil, which is practically better in every single way possible, and Astro's in its state it's in. Another problem I feel right now is the Nocturnal sect. It having 1k on aspected benefit, 1k MP cost on aspected benefit is probably alright. But the moment neutral sect goes on, I feel that MP cost should go down to 500, because neutral sect allows aspected benefit and aspected Helios to both give a regen and a shield. And with a Diurnal sect, aspected benefit is only 500 MP, while Nocturnal is 1k MP. That really highlights that you want to be in Diurnal. It's cheaper, it's easier to try and get healing through on Diurnal as well. especially with Celestial Intersection, which in Diurnal gives a shield, whereas in Nocturnal it gives a regen, which is a very weak regen in Nocturnal as well. I feel like Nocturnal should have potentially have its 20% healing potency again. Like, give it something worthy of why it has the 1k MP cost on that and expected benefit and so forth. Because right now, I really cannot say this enough. You'd want to avoid Nocturnal if you can. You only really go Nocturnal if you know you need shields. The current card system, people used to complain with the old card system that most people fish for balances. I find this untrue. I never did that unless it was pre-pull. Pre-pull, yeah, I will try and fish for a balance. For an AoE balance specifically. But during a fight, I would work with whatever I get draw and try and use them. And because the more you try and hold off for trying to get AoE balance, the less amount of buff you're getting out on the party and the less damage you used to give. Currently now, especially with Divination's poor party-wide buff and everything else, I would really not. I really do not like having to try and fish for 3 different seals just to try and make Divination worthwhile. This is probably worse than trying to fish for an AoE balance, because even with 3 shuffles, you could very easily never get to that last seal you need. And that last seal is what's going to possibly make Divination worthwhile. Possibly, depending on when it goes out, obviously, with raid compositions and so forth. Now, I do like that the current system indefinitely holds your card. And it overwrites the moment you play anything else. I just wish that Minor Arcana, when you do that, it could hold a Lord of a Lady separately to the draw card. Because currently Minor Arcana doesn't do this, and if you were to draw again while you had a Minor Arcana, you would lose that card. That's entirely on the player, but allowing you to hold on to a Minor Arcana could be separately to a basic draw card. I just feel would allow us to align busts better, like as best as they can given their current system. Shuffling free time is fine. Sleeve draw I also find is pretty okay given its thing. It's just the GCD. You may get distracted a lot with your card drawing, and again it's going to be a case of try and weave it into between your GCDs, whether it's DPS or whether it's healing or whatever. But at the moment I don't have too much issues with the current card system. I will still say I preferred the old system, but I can work with the current system. I just really don't like trying to fish for that last seal. Like, I've had really bad RNG, like worse than Dancer RNG at points, and yeah, trying to get that last seal just to try and get a Divination worthwhile has been occasionally nightmarish. At the moment I feel like those are probably the biggest issues. I personally would like to focus on the card buffs most again. Try and buff them first and see how Astro holds its place from there. If it needs to buff the base healing potencies, but leave Astro personal DPS as low. I think that is perfectly fine given what Astro can do. But I want the card buffs being the priority thing to sort out. Like, make that really worthwhile. Like, that is your main reason for taking an Astro. You get buffed out the wazoo. I will also say I'd also like to have collective unconsciousness be up there with the card buffs. Like, that needs to be adjusted heavily, especially when so long as Sacred Soil is where it is. And I don't really want a nerf to Sacred Soil. I find that is perfectly fine to keep it usable. But collective unconsciousness needs to be brought up, like, heavily, like possibly even surpassing Sacred Soil, because of the whole rooting in place Astro has to do. Because Astro cannot move while it's using that skill, cannot cast anything. It is firmly stuck into place, and it has a smaller radius. So it requires the party to run into them, which is not always great, especially depending on the boss. And after those two big things have been sorted, I think sorting out Celestial Opposition, and then if it really does, if it's still in a very underwhelming place on the healing front, buff the healing potencies. But again, I would rather the personal DPS of Astro stay low. I find that it should be the lowest personal DPSer, but it should be the highest party raid beneficiar. Like, its card buffs absolutely should be the first thing that needs to be buffed the most. I'm sorry this video has been like quite ranty. It's Astro is again a very much a love of mine, and I have loved the class for a very long time. I want it to do better. I'm saddened by the current state of Astro, but fortunately it doesn't feel like it is as bad as its initial release in 3.0, where again it was sort of in the same position, where its card buff wasn't worthwhile compared to the other healers. Its healing was really low, but the difference between then and now is then Astro was to a point where you weren't going to clear fights with it, whereas now you should be able to clear every single fight with Astro perfectly fine in the party. So there's no real reason to exclude them. It's just both the other healers are better at this point. I would like to thank you all for watching the video on what I feel about Astro, and I will bow out. Thank you. See ya.